great example. Wrap around the Oya. Better when they're smaller. Oh my goodness. Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. Before we get into the garden today, I wanted to remind you guys that we do have a pre-order going on for our handmade ceramic mugs. These are lead-free, handmade in Wisconsin by Sunset Hill Stoneware, and the pre-order for these mugs is going to close on November 3rd at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. I will be placing the order November 4th. They're going to take 12 weeks to get into me. Hopefully they come in sooner, and then when I have them, it'll take me probably about 3 to 5 days to get them shipped out to you. So if you're interested in that, I have a payment link in the description box and in the pinned comment below. Without further ado, let's get to the garden. So we're gonna start over here in the raised bed garden today. This is midday, so the lighting may look a little bit different, but as you can see, we do have tomatoes still. We experienced a total of 4 nights of frost that didn't damage this area of the garden at all, and it's kind of crazy to me to be going into November with tomatoes, but we are. Here's a great example. These are super sweet 100s, beautiful tomatoes. And honestly, we haven't gotten a lot of rain at all since Hurricane Helene. I have watered this garden once since then, but we're due to get some rain tomorrow, so I haven't run the irrigation in a while, and the tomatoes coming out of this garden right now are so good. We've got some of our famous yellow ones here. A lot of fruits, but tomatoes especially, when you withhold water for a little while. Obviously not long enough to really stress the plant out, but just enough. You get a concentrate of the sugars inside, and so good. My loofah gourd and some tomatoes are really kind of taking over my poor rose plant here. I will set her free pretty soon, but we're getting the last blooms of the season. The tag that was on this rose when I bought it said Secret Tea Rose, and it's incredibly fragrant. I've never done anything with these rose petals, but I imagine these would be amazing in a tea since it's a tea rose. The last garden tour we had, I harvested quite a few green and brown loofahs, and I left a lot of them on. I have actually processed a lot of those loofah, and I just may harvest some more. We're not gonna harvest at all today, but I've got so many out here that are still really good, and I actually prefer to process the green loofah versus the brown ones. They just stay white without needing any kind of bleach or anything. You can see loofah down here. So I think I'm gonna be harvesting some more of these before we get a real killing freeze, which I'll have to look again, but I think we are several weeks out from experiencing that. We did get our frost a little bit early, but as I mentioned, it didn't really kill anything. And since then, it's been unseasonably warm. It's 82 today, which is very warm for the day before Halloween. Stepping into the raised bed garden, you can see I do have a little bit of damage on some of the flowers over here. These zinnia have like powdery mildew and tons of disease. But down here I noticed that I had some volunteer elephant garlic popping up in this bed. This is where I had a big melon called the Ginger's Pride melon, but before that I had elephant garlic here, and we've got some of it popping up. Bonus garlic. So that's pretty fun. Right here I do have some root vegetables that I poked in here for fall time. The beets aren't doing super great, and you can probably see why. Through most of the day these are shaded, and this is different during the summer months, but the sun behaves differently in the winter time. It gets a lot lower in the sky, and we have a big tree over here that's casting a lot of shade on this part of the garden, and so these rutabaga do fine. It's like the tree shades to right where our beets are, and then the rutabaga is okay. These guys have leafed out quite a lot. We're still quite a while from seeing any roots going on in there, any bulbing of the root base. A little bit of pest damage, really nothing to shake a stick at. This little guy doesn't look too awesome, but when I look for the wormies, I don't see them. Oh, here's one right here. That's a cabbage looper. And there's another one down here. I may come through here with some BT, but not before rain, because the rain would just wash that off anyway. So it'll be a couple days if I treat over there. I haven't really done much as far as clean out over here. This area is going to take me probably all winter to clean out and get ready for springtime. But do you see that butterfly? We've got all kinds of pollinators that are loving the fact that I left these poor, sad, dying zinnias in, getting the last little bits of nectar that they can. Boop. That's one of my honeybees. She's partaking. It looks like that particular bee may be collecting pollen. Can you see her pollen baskets on her legs? I think I freaked her out a little bit. She flew away, but hopefully you got to see those. She's storing up pollen and taking it back to the hive because they are still making baby bees, and they're going to feed those baby bees with that pollen. Pollen is very protein rich. I do still have a few walking onions that have given us some more greens. I have not taken very great care of this bed, so I don't have a lot of them, but I do have some, and I have been pulling from the volunteer dill that's over here. Dill is frost tolerant to a point. I personally absolutely love it. It's been really exciting to have that here during soup season. It looks like the asparagus was affected by some of the frost. Some of the fronds are still living. I'll wait for these to die back completely before I clean this area up. Really the main show for the fall and winter garden is the greenhouse. I just wanted to update you on this area, the perennial garden. All the grapes that you see on all of the trellises, this here is like a purple variety called Sunbelt, and over there those are green muscadines called Carlos muscadine grapes. All of these are first year plants and they've done really well. I'm very proud of them. Next year hopefully we'll get some grape clusters. So down low here, the frost did kill off the volunteer tomatoes that we had, but up here they're still living. So the frost that did come, it settled low but left a lot of good things up high. So we still have even some slicer tomatoes. Look at that. So crazy. And we'll probably have volunteer tomatoes over here until the end of time. So when I've harvested green loofah in the past, I took a video on it. I'll share it in the description box. But when I harvested those, I actually cut the centers out of the loofah to make kind of a flat loofah sheet to make sponges out of. But this year I did something a little bit different, and I want to show you real quick what that process was like, because I was actually able to get like a round loofah out of the loofahs this year. So that's pretty exciting. Do a little bit of a different thing with the round loofah. So as you can see, I'm just crunching up the gourd. There are some stringy bits in there. You kind of can unzip them with. Now this particular gourd, you can see that it's starting to turn yellow. I did pick this off of the plant when it was green, and it just started to turn yellow in the last couple of days. I don't know if this would have dried out completely or not. I kind of suspect that it wouldn't have, that it probably would have rotted. I don't know. It's been pretty warm here. As I mentioned, today our high is 82, so maybe in like a cool, dry area you can get them to dry out off the plant. I think I've seen where some people have put them in the ovens to dry them out. It's really not necessary though. You can get a quality loofah out of green one like this without a ton of work. Some people online are really good at peeling off the outside in one go from a green loofah. I'm not really that good at that. There we go. So it's completely skinned at this point. And this bottom end here is kind of open. You can see the seeds in there. Some of them are dark. Some of these could be viable. Just kind of squish it to get those seeds somewhat free. Down here, this is one of our rain catchment barrels. Just turn this on. And if you massage the loofah, almost in a way where you would milk a goat or milk a cow, you can get a lot of the seeds out that way. And one of the things I've done actually to make the process a little bit easier for myself is cut the loofah either in half or in thirds. I was just looking at this one to try to figure out what may be the best for this one. See in there? There's a lot of black seeds in there. Just work those seeds out. And I have this cinder block holding up my barrel. Just hit that against it, and it throws some of the seeds out. There we go. That's the clean, round loofah, and this does need to dry out still. This probably still could use a little bit of scrubbing, but this works. One of the fun things that I've noticed with processing loofah is that some of them have 4 holes and some of them have 3. This is good news here. It looks like my honeybees have found the bee feeder. So there should be lots of bees over here pretty soon, because this girl's gonna go back to the hive and tell everybody of the good news of all of this sugar syrup that I have out here. Because as you saw, the bees are on the flowers, but the flowers are really starting to die, so we start feeding our bees around this time every year. Right here is our kids' garden, and they have started cleaning it out and amending their garden. I've asked them each to get 4 buckets of manure from the barn to fill up their beds. So this is really what's left over after summer. We did have them all the way full. They've just sank down quite a lot. And then once they get the 4 buckets of manure from the barn, we're topping it off with some bagged soil. And then they want to plant some radishes and carrots and things in here. Over the summer, their gardens were watered with this watering system that we got from Epic Gardening. These are called Oyas, and they actually work by holding in water down in here, and the terracotta pot slowly seeps the water out into the bed. And as you can see on this Oya that we haven't cleaned off, the roots of the plants find the water and they wrap around the Oya, and they get a good drink of water throughout the summer. It's not over watering, but this system allows them to get enough water where, like, maybe a kid wouldn't be as thorough with the hose or whatever. This helps as kind of a fail-safe, and this worked wonderfully. We did want to remove them from the beds for winter just because the freeze and thaw cycle wouldn't probably work well for these. It could risk breakage. So we're gonna put these in storage after we clean them off a little bit. Real interesting thing, they have a green stalk over here that we had some flowers in, and a lot of the flowers died back when they got a little bit of frost. But we noticed that there were some volunteer lettuces that popped up in here. So actually a lot of these flowers I had sitting in a flat inside my perennial garden, just waiting for me to get to putting them in this green stalk. And at the time I had some lettuce that was going to seed, and some of it did go to seed and landed in the pots with these flowers, which is really cool. Now these have been out here a while. They are in full sun and it has been quite hot, so some of the lettuce, like this one, is going to seed. There were some pretty yellow flowers on here this morning, but it's a little later in the day. But perpetual lettuce is in motion. So I thought that was kind of cool. Hello, handsomes. I don't have your food right now. Where's Mooch? Here he comes. Poor Mooch is always pulling in the rear. You bringing in the caboose, Mooch? I really like having the goats this close to the greenhouse. It's fun. So the greenhouse is looking so good. I was a little bit worried that our warm temps was gonna cause some of our brassicas to go to flower, as can happen like with that lettuce. The lettuce has also been there quite a while, and so really there's a time limit. You can't just perpetually have plants in the ground. Eventually they will flower, but warm conditions can definitely trigger things like lettuces and broccolis and other brassicas. Lettuce is not a brassica, but broccoli is, and they are a little bit heat sensitive, and so I was worried. But we have decided to keep the shade cloth on the greenhouse all winter long. This is a 30% shade cloth, and there is sun on the greenhouse all day long. And so given that the percentage isn't that high for the shade cloth, I think that even though the days are shorter, the plants that are in here will still be getting plenty of sunlight, and this will help kind of be like a fail-safe for when the days are warmer than really I feel like they should be for the time of year, because that's one of the things is we can stay quite warm until about January, and a lot of times that's the downfall of my fall and winter garden. But so far, so good. I'm starting to get excited. Guess we'll start on this side. We've got some random brassicas up here. This here is a cabbage. This here is a Brussels sprout. Down here we have some carrots that are looking quite well, and it is going to be a while before we can harvest. Get kind of a sneak peek down at the roots. There's really nothing developing, a lot like our rutabagas. Over in this bed, this looked different the last time we had a garden tour. These are some kohlrabi that we planted relatively close together, and these are starting to look like they're bulbing up a little bit, which is pretty exciting. This is some chard, but right here, these are all radishes. And radishes really develop very quickly, so you can see that we've already gotten some swelling of the roots down here. I have a picture that I took that shows the different varieties of radishes. I know that these two rows here are watermelon radish. I had a weird germination on this side. I actually haven't thinned out these rows at all, and I really should. Depending on the type and final size of radish, you want to thin the plants out so you get the right amount of space for that radish to really do its best. So these here on this side, I thin them out to about every 2 to 3 inches, and that's going to be plenty of space. So that's what I'm doing with these watermelon radishes as well. These can get a little bit bigger, but they're better when they're smaller, and you can eat these. I am choosing not to, but you totally can, kind of like a microgreen. Root vegetables in the greenhouse is really something that I haven't been able to do very well until recently, because until very recently we were growing in ground in the greenhouse, and I have this weed fabric down, and I had some holes burned in the weed fabric, but still our ground is clay and it's very wet. You can actually grow, especially things like radishes, sometimes quite well in clay soil, but I feel like I never would have been able to grow that number of radishes very well in here. I'll try and overlay some footage of the garden tour from a couple weeks ago so you can see exactly how much things have grown. I've talked about how I don't really know what's what in these beds, but as these plants are getting bigger, I'm starting to really discern what we're looking at, and so I think I can kind of help show you the difference of the different plants. I had started from seed, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage, and some kohlrabi. I know where the kohlrabi is because I planted that a little bit later, and I know where some of our golden acre cabbage is because I planted that a little bit later. But some of the earlier starts that I did, this one looks like a cauliflower. You can see that the leaf is relatively smooth on the outside edge, and the center almost curls in on itself. These leaves are more oblong than something like this. This is a cabbage. Can you tell that the leaves are more rounded? By feel, they're also more leathery and a little bit lighter colored. That's a cabbage. And right next to that, we have a plant that has rounded leaves as well. They are a little bit more leathery as well, but the leaves themselves have this almost stem to them. This is a Brussels sprout. So I've got some random things in here doing quite well. There's actually something funny over here. Last garden tour I talked about how I had kind of played a little bit of musical mulch in here as I was filling the beds and trying to amend them. I wanted to remove the mulch so that I could properly get under it in order to provide nutrition to the beds. And in moving over some of the mulch, I moved over just some tomatoes that had fallen. These tomatoes actually grew over there, but I wanted to show you something that's happening. This is what happens when you leave a whole tomato in the bed. You get a bunch of little tomato seedlings. Now these are not gonna survive. I actually should probably pull these out so we can keep the nutrition in the bed. But this is what you get when you essentially plant a whole tomato. Being that this has a purple stem, this was probably a blue cream berry or a strawberry tomato. Something with anthocyanins in it. I think I could see a little bit of the skin from the tomato that it came from right here. So it looks like it's a little bit of a lighter skin. So yeah, I think blue cream berry is probably it. There's actually tomato volunteers forever, and that will continue to happen, and that is okay. We actually encourage that around here. Back here I have this bed that I planted just before the garden tour last week. It looks like we did lose a seedling here. R.I.P. little dude. But the seedlings hadn't popped up by the time I took that tour. Down on this side is some yod fa broccoli, kind of like a sprouting broccoli. It looks a lot like asparagus and broccoli had a baby, and it's very, very tender and very sweet and delicious. I have attempted to grow. I've grown it successfully a couple of times, and it's very good. It's very heat tolerant. When I haven't had success growing broccoli in the past, the yod fa broccoli has really been awesome to have. But the past 2 years at least, birds have eaten my seedlings down, which is why I haven't had it. It wasn't for not trying. So I have noticed that the rubber snakes that I put in my greenhouse, plus these scary eyeballs, are really doing their job keeping the birds out of the beds. So we're able to get the yod fa broccoli started from seed in here, as well as this is pak choi. So I'll leave the snakes over here for a little while until these guys really are big enough to hold their own. I haven't watered the pepper row in here since Hurricane Helene because that was a lot of water all at once. We have these pumpkins that we grew this summer that were just sitting in water. It was a whole thing, and when I poked my finger down into the planting hole of the peppers, I could feel that it was still moist down in there. So I don't know how much rain we're supposed to get tomorrow. I do know it's supposed to be a heavier kind of rain day, and very frequently this time of year the rain will wash in here, and that will water the peppers. Truthfully too, as the rain comes in here, it should soak up into the beds as well. But the beds themselves, because the plants are planted at the top of the beds, even though they can wick up moisture from the bottom, they provide a lot of drainage, which has been so vital for us. I haven't been awesome at growing spinach in the past, but it looks like we may, knock on wood, have success this year. I planted 2 different types of plants. This looks like a chard to me. I think every other plant is a chard and every other plant is a spinach. So a little hard for me to tell right now. Kind of hope that's a spinach, not really sure. That one might be a spinach. I think I at least have a small amount of success. Over on this archway, we have some more kohlrabi, and I have had a hard time growing kohlrabi in the past, but it looks like we are due to have some success again. As you can see, we're getting a little bit of bulb happening right there. Earlier, these plants were struggling a little bit with harlequin bugs coming after them. I don't think that that's what that is. It does look a little bit like we may be dealing with cabbage loopers over here. Those little green caterpillars that we picked off of the plants in the other garden. That's the same thing going on in here. I have noticed that in here, the pressure is not as bad, partially because we do have wasps that love the greenhouse. And while I detest wasps, they do provide assistance in the garden. They will take those little cabbage looper worms and just fly away with them to feed their young, and so I try to tolerate the wasps as long as I can because they are beneficial to the garden. I hate to admit it. On the other side of the kohlrabi, I have these green arrow shelling peas that are starting to climb up the trellis. I need to kind of make sure that they're not going to be trying to climb the kohlrabi, so it just takes a little bit of redirecting as they grow. I have that same type of pea down here. I think these guys last garden tour were barely popped up above the surface, but they're well above now, so it's just a matter of getting them tuned and trained to the trellis. Behind them I have some ragged jack or red Russian kale that I had transplanted shortly before the tour last week, and they are starting to take off. I have watered in here recently, but it is a little bit hot today, so some of our leaves are looking a little droopy. I'm not super worried about that. I do believe that this is the last day that we will see in the 80s until next year. As far as peas go, we've got some tall peas over here. I'm actually gonna crouch down next to the pea trellis like I did in the last garden tour so you can really see how much they've grown. I think they were about a foot high 2 weeks ago, and now they've more than doubled that. I thought we'd be seeing some blooms by now, but so far, no. Lots and lots more foliage. I mean, the plants are well over 3 feet tall at this point, but no blooms yet. Oh, is this a bud? I don't know what I'm seeing. On the other side, of this trellis. They're getting shaded a little bit right now, but it's not a problem. Right now it's about 1 p.m. and the whole morning this side of the trellis was getting sun. And so it was about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 5 hours of sun, which is fine. They're getting a little bit of filtered light at this point, and most brassicas need about 4 to 6 hours of daylight, so that's fine. And these here are broccolis. So in contrast to the cauliflower, the leaves on the cauliflower, this is much bigger than the ones that are over across the greenhouse, but they have a more consistent spoon-like shape. The broccoli does too, but it's way more, it's like lobed. There's more lobes in it and it's a little bit more frilly, and the color is darker. We can see already that we are starting to get a tiny little broccoli head in there. I am so excited. This particular variety of broccoli, can't remember the name of it, but I know that it's a heat tolerant hybrid. So I was a little less worried that these would react to some of our warmer days than maybe some of my other brassicas. But look how big they are. Oh my goodness, look at them all. So beautiful. We've got broccoli here. You can really see the difference in the plants. We've got cauliflower down there. More broccoli, more broccoli. I ran into this leaf and kind of snapped it, but it's all right. More cauliflower down here. In this particular bed, when I was in here earlier opening up the doors, I did notice that I was dealing with some more harlequin bugs and a few more cabbage loopers. Because we have a cover over this space, I can actually treat in here a lot more frequently if needed. Like, it's gonna rain tomorrow, it's gonna rain all day. So if I was to try to treat for cabbage loopers out with the rutabagas, that treatment would just get washed off, but that would not be the case in here. So I'm able to tailor my treatments a little bit more towards the needs of the plants rather than trying to work around the weather inside the greenhouse. So that's very nice. You can see we've got some damage here. So what I will do is treat with liquid BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis or something like that. I like the liquid form. You can also buy it in a powder form, but the liquid form goes a really long way, and I just stick it in my backpack sprayer and I spray the tops and undersides of the leaves, and the treatment lasts as long as the leaves are out. And I really should only have to treat one time, because the cooler temps, those moths that come and lay the eggs, they're little and white, they won't be flying and trying to procreate much longer. More broccoli over here. These guys are planted a little bit closer together than the ones that are in here, so these guys may get a little bit bigger. I have them about, I don't know what that is, every 18 inches here, but I do have one plugged in the middle, so that takes up space and some nutrients. That should be fine. We may end up with smaller broccoli heads by doing that, but I'm okay with that. They all just look so good. These are basically just living off of goat manure. Isn't that great? I think this bed makes me the most excited. These are the Glory of Euchenhausen cabbage. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but there's some kind of moth in there. That was not a cabbage looper, but any kind of moth is probably not good. So I will be spraying with BT probably this evening. But we are starting to get some heads on our cabbage. This particular cabbage in the past has been pretty heat tolerant, so I haven't really worried about that. I've got a head forming in there. You can kind of pinch and feel that the leaves are getting much more dense. This shorter bed here is 2 feet by 8 feet, and there's 5 cabbages in here. Super exciting thing that I noticed with this particular Brussels sprout, you can see we have the round leaves, but like the longer stem on the leaf. But you can see down in the little crook or leaf node right here, we have the littlest, tiny little baby Brussels sprout forming. Can you see that in there? So we can see baby cabbages, we can see baby broccolis, we can see baby Brussels sprouts. I'm definitely excited. Only one other time has a fall garden worked out well for me, and arguably it wasn't as nice as this. I had planted, right after we initially set up the greenhouse, we had pigs in here, and right after we moved the pigs out, I planted a fall garden that year, but I planted it a little late, so many of my plants just sort of went dormant. over the coldest part of the winter. Thankfully, many of them lived, and they came to fruition in the late winter and early spring. But these guys, we should be able to harvest pretty well by about the end of December. We should have most things harvested in here, and that means that we can have like a full fall harvest and then space to really start a spring planting, which normally I will plant out my spring brassicas in February. I will have started them from seed in December, and so that works out well. Brassicas, cole crops like this, are our family's favorite food, and so to be able to get 2 harvests of them a year is amazing to me. So I am super grateful. I still have not managed to take apart and amend the green stalks, but that is coming. Eventually I'll do that. We do still have some things growing in here. That's Swiss chard, but like I mentioned, the wasps have me avoiding that for now. That's it as far as what I have growing for the fall garden, but I wanted to give everybody some closure on the pumpkin patch. I'm just gonna grab one of these zucchinis here as an offering to Chloe, because I am pretty sure Chloe has run out of pumpkins because there's nothing in here. Hi, Miss Mia. You want this? Oh. Bite it. Good girl, bite it. Got this nosy boy over here. Do you want some? No. Here. There you go, Chloe. You're so nasty. It's really crazy to look out here and remember how full it was with the pumpkin vines. You can only see just a few little remnants, but the frost really did settle and kill in here very thoroughly. And I no longer see any hints of any pumpkins, so Chloe's eating her fill. So that's what I've got for you. It will be really exciting to see how long we can take things like this Malabar spinach and these peppers that are on this side of the greenhouse into winter. I do believe we have a hard freeze somewhere in the next 2 weeks on the forecast, and whether or not these plants survive really depends on how the weather is the day before those plummeting temps. Normally those low temps come overnight, and if I can close the greenhouse during the day with a nice sunny day out, we can retain quite a bit of heat in here. Now, I've never taken this greenhouse through the winter with these raised beds. These raised beds, we intentionally bought gray ones. We wanted a darker color so they can kind of act like a heat battery. They can retain some of the heat inside the soil to maybe keep even more heat in here. And so I really need to get the batteries going in my thermometer so we can really tell how good this greenhouse is doing, because it's not heated. I don't really feel like I need a heated greenhouse. We have a really long growing season to begin with, and like I mentioned, our favorite crops are of the cool loving varieties, so I don't need a heated greenhouse. But it would be kind of nice to see how long we can take those plants like that into winter with the raised beds in here. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys again soon.